it's really key that that word development is there because it's an ongoing process, right? And just some of the learning that I've been digging into, oftentimes we think about phonological awareness happening in those early grades, but we also know there's a benefit to teaching some of our older kids who may be striving a bit towards better reading and writing comprehension to really dig into this aspect of reading. Today, I'm here with you, and my colleague Michelle Wagner is also here. And I'm going to be sharing some information, hopefully, some strategies that you might be able to use and replicate in your classroom as you see fit for your population. We're going to watch a couple of videos. It's kind of funny because we spent so much time doing virtual learning, and we thought about ways of making it engaging. And I will have to say that this probably isn't the most engaging session. And I think it's okay. You know, it's the end of the day. It's still summertime. Go ahead and, just take in what it is that we're offering to you today. And just know that I won't be having you do some breakouts or anything like that. It's going to be just kind of your own personal learning. But know that there are always opportunities to reach out to any one of us at MAISA if you have further questions. And that's why our emails are listed there. The hope is that you do reach out and that you extend this practice. So that's what may be to expect during our time together. So one of the themes you may have noticed if you participated in other summer blitz sessions that we're really honing in on this notion of the whole child and really being mindful of putting that at the center of all the learning that's happening throughout our summer blitz. And we know that the whole child is really trying to lift up a child in multiple ways. We want them to be safe and feel safe and be healthy within the school day and throughout the year. But more importantly, we really want to make sure that they feel supported and we're able to give them what they may need to feel challenged, to feel engaged in learning. And you can see this graphic is quite lovely when we think about those 5 tenets, certainly, but other ways of how we're really promoting the community to help support each and every child. You may have seen this before. It is a quote from A Nation at Risk to a Nation at Hope. And that came out of some of the work that was done throughout the pandemic and prior. Of course, we know the whole child concept has been around for years, but really it's nothing new. And what this quote is really lifting is that it's not something more that we have to add to our plates to think about the whole child. It's really what we do. It's who we are as teachers and educators, and it's really what we all are. We're learners, right? And to be able to be engaged and supported and feel challenged in our learning process, we need to be really mindful of paying attention to those social, emotional, not only academic learning. So today we are going to spend some time talking about phonological awareness and a couple other terms that might be floating around in your mind, and you might be wondering, how do I keep these all straight? We're going to be talking about some effective practices that will really help to promote literacy and language in your classroom, mostly focused on phonological awareness, of course, for today. And we're also going to be talking about some strategies that you might be able to use in a small group or a whole group session to help us support learners in hearing sounds and really connecting those to letters and words and all the things we do in literacy. What I really like to do, some of you may have been part of my group. I recognize some of these names from yesterday. Yesterday, the focus was on oral language. So you'll notice I'm doing a couple in this series, and they're kind of labeled foundational skills, right? And what I really wanted to do is like separate out what we mean when we say foundational skills. I think people hear those terms and they directly go to one thing. And we know that foundational skills are very encompassing and really a means to the end of being able to be a proficient reader and writer. And so going back into our ELA standards from Michigan is a really important thing to do, just to maybe refine the thinking around what we mean by foundational skills and clarifying that for ourselves. So just a couple of quick things to point out within the definition of foundational skills is really thinking about understanding that working knowledge of what we mean by concepts of print, understanding how children are able to hold books, they're able to know which way language moves in the text, they're able to find a lot of interesting information outside of just reading words within text. We think about the alphabetic principle and kids knowing their letters and their sounds that are associated with those letters, and other kinds of conventions within our writing system. And then again, as you heard me say just a bit earlier, these skills are not an end in itself, in themselves, but rather they are just important components to become a proficient reader and writer. It's part of a comprehensive reading program. So when you look at your curriculum and you're thinking about all the learning that's happening in a literacy block or throughout your whole literacy day, we really want to be mindful of foundational skills being one subset of the work that you're doing within literacy throughout the day. Another thing to really think about is that once students are pretty competent in those foundational skills, there's really no reason to keep teaching them. The goal is to become that proficient reader, right? And once kids are proficient readers and writers, there's really no reason to go back and build on those foundational skills because they're already set. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as we move on today. I think it's very important that we ground ourselves in very valid and vetted research. And of course, you may have seen some other work coming out of What Works Clearinghouse and the Institute of Education. But what we want to really lift here from this practice guide summary are 4 main understandings that we can lean into when we think about recommending supports to build reading and understanding with our youngest learners. So I'd like to talk to you about those real quickly. Again, kind of in combination of what we were just talking about with foundational skills and our standards. So what we found from solid research and vetted research is that there are 4 recommendations for us classroom teachers to really consider when we're lifting up that reading instruction. Number 1 is really talking about that academic language, thinking and teaching children what we mean by inferential and narrative language, how text is set up and how language in text may differ from the spoken language. And also really thinking about vocabulary knowledge. There's many aspects and layers of vocabulary instruction. We want to help build those academic language skills. And through vocabulary instruction, we can do that. Another recommendation is to really focus a chunk of time on segments of sounds and speech and how they're linked to letters. And that's particularly what we're going to talk about today. When we think about phonological awareness, it's really focused on everything that we hear in speech, in language. A third recommendation to become an effective reader and an effective instructor in grades K through 3, we really need to be looking closely at teaching students how to decode words, thinking about chunking those words up into word parts and being able to write and recognize those words. And then certainly lastly, we would like to lift up this notion of supporting reading each and every day to texts that are connected to students, and that will help them build their accuracy, fluency, and comprehension across the board. So again, yesterday our focus was on oral language, and we could see those pieces coming out in each 4 of these recommendations. Today, you'll see most of an emphasis on this number 2, where we're listening, really being aware and develop that awareness of how sounds are connected to letters. Some examples that you'll see today also will touch upon the third recommendation here. It's really hard to separate the work we do in phonological awareness without not always showing a visual with it. So I just wanted you to be mindful of 4 of these recommendations and how bringing all of those pieces together are vital to have a comprehensive reading program. Today, we're talking about phonological awareness. And just so we are clear and in the understanding of what we mean by phonological awareness, it's important to define that. And in this case, we're talking about the awareness, the understanding, the aha of what we mean by sounds of words in learning to read and spell. Sometimes you'll hear people mention the word phonemes, and that simply is that smallest unit of speech, that smallest unit. So when you think about the word nut, for example, you might hear that and that is a phoneme. It's the sound, the smallest increment of sound that we would hear when we associate the letter that corresponds to that sound, which is an N. Phonological awareness can also be defined as the way or the ability to pay really careful attention to the sounds that make up our language. And I love this picture because it's really just honing in on that lovely little ear of our little guy, because he's really paying attention to all the different sounds that make up the way they converse and communicate with one another. Oftentimes, you'll hear phonological awareness being an overarching umbrella of sorts. And I loved this visual that I found because it really encapsulated a lot of things that we talk about when we're thinking about phonological awareness. So it's kind of an umbrella term. It harnesses all of that work that we do when we're helping students to learn to notice and manipulate sounds in speech. So you'll see a multitude of things that fall underneath that umbrella. It might be rhyming words and playing with words in rhymes. It might be singing songs and playing around with sounds and changing beginning and ending sounds. It could be a combination of segmenting sounds or maybe blending them together. There's a variety of activities that really fall under phonological awareness. So think of that as the broad umbrella of all the work we do with manipulating and noticing sounds in our language. A question you may be asking is, how does this phonological awareness really help to support my readers and writers in my classroom? And even though sounds and letters aren't perfectly related, the awareness of the sounds and the words is very important when we talk about learning how to read. So when we say it's not perfect, we know that that same N in nut sounds a little different than it might in the word bent, right? Because it's connected to that T. We want to make sure kids are able to identify those different sounds that are connected to particular letters. And if they are aware that those sounds can have different, they take on a different sound in a different word, that's very important when it comes to identifying words on paper. Children need to be able to distinguish the sounds so they can attach those to letters. So it's not something that just happens naturally, that if I'm speaking and I'm learning how to speak and my oral language is moving along just perfectly, I can differentiate those sounds. Once I've differentiated those sounds, I should be able to connect those two letters or chunks of letters together that make particular sounds. And as children become literate, they need a heightened awareness of speech. And that gets kind of tricky because as students progress in their reading, they stumble upon words that are a little bit trickier. Think about that O-U-G-H. Boy, we can't sound that one out, can we? And so as children begin to say those maybe more challenging words, they're going to have to be able to know, how do I create a visual representation of that sound with the letters that I know? These are all important in helping to support our earliest readers and writers. And then just a few things to clarify around some other literary terms that you may have heard or may have been confused about, myself included. Michelle might not as well, because we hear these things and sometimes it just seems like we're getting confused along the way. What I wanted to point out was the definition of a phonemic awareness. Oftentimes people will use phonemic awareness and phonological awareness as synonyms. And there is a slight difference between the two of them. When we talk about phonemic awareness, it's actually a part of phonological awareness. It's something that falls underneath that big umbrella. It's a way of manipulating sounds, okay? Even though we're working at articulating sounds and noticing them and manipulating them, all of that falls underneath that huge umbrella of phonological awareness, but also within that subcategory of phonemic awareness. If I were to talk to you a little bit about reading aloud and the importance of playing with words, that would really fall under phonological awareness as the big umbrella. But if I wanted to pull one or two words out of that text and really play with those sounds and manipulate them, pull them apart and notice the distinguishing sounds, that would be more into the phonemic awareness realm. Another term that you might confuse when you're hearing about phonological awareness is the word phonics. And really, phonics is very different than phonological awareness. They are complements of one another, and one can't happen without the other. But phonics is really understanding and learning the relationships between those sounds that we hear in our spoken language and how they're connected to letters, okay? You'll see a few words in parentheses here. When we talk about the spoken language, remember those smallest units of sign speech, those are called phonemes. But then when we talk about phonics, we're connecting it to the actual visual, the letter. And we oftentimes will hear or see the word graphemes. So again, how important are those roots in learning the understanding of where vocabulary comes from? Phone, right? And graph. So we can that helps us to understand and distinguish the difference between these literary terms that are coming across kind of at lightning speed sometimes if we're digging into the learning and the teaching of early readers and writers. So the next thing that I really wanted to share with you, and hopefully this doesn't look like a new slide. Hopefully it looks familiar. Hopefully you've seen some of these documents on the left. These are all part of a suite of documents within our literacyessentials.org. And Michelle, thanks for placing that site in our chat. The goal for myself, right, along with many of my teammates at MAISA, is to make sure that each and every teacher in our region, in Wayne County, have access to these documents. Whatever grade you're teaching or whatever area of focus you have, that you have access to these documents. They started to be created, I think, back in 2015, and the first document that was originated was in 2016, and it was actually the K-3 documents. Since then, they have created, like I said, a suite of documents starting at birth, and they stem all the way through 12th grade. What they are they're vetted in research. I've learned a lot about that over the last years. Sometimes when you're in the midst of a classroom, you really just want practical ideas on what can I do each and every day that are going to help my kids in the most effective way. And I feel like I've had some luxury of being away from that daily grind to really digging into the research and knowing what to follow and what to really hold true to, and make sure that we share with other educators, certainly across our state. These are being shared across our entire state, Upper Peninsula too. And the hope is that if we can get these documents in the hands of all teachers, if teachers learn about these instructional practices within these documents, we will see a huge change in our achievement across literacy. Of course, it started with the K-3 because that was right around the time when our third grade legislation took effect. We have seen a tremendous amount of growth over the last 6 years now, with teachers really honing their practice. When you open these essentials, you may read the initial 10 and you may say, oh my gosh, I do this. I'm a great teacher. And I think I did that, right? Michelle, you're shaking your head too. What we come to learn over years of learning, right, and open-mindedness is that there are some things that we can do to adjust our practice to make go actually literally going from good to great, right? There's some things that we can be more intentional about, and we understand the reason. And I'm going to give you just one quick example. I believe that I wasn't a very strong vocabulary teacher. Now, I wouldn't have said that out loud before these essentials because I really didn't dig in and be reflective of my vocabulary teaching. But after learning, hearing from researchers, and watching things in action, I realized, wow, there were times when I could have been so much more intentional during my read alouds to make sure I focused on particular words and their meaning, even inserting child-friendly meanings within the story, not to disrupt it, would have helped support vocabulary instruction in the classroom. And that was one way that I could have totally lifted up the work that I was doing. So I encourage you, if these are new to you, to really dig into them. If you've seen them, maybe you have the booklet on the corner of your desk, that's great. How can you make those more usable within your day? The modules and videos are also available on literacyessentials.org. Those are fabulous. All the videos are Michigan teachers, actually, which is really kind of fun. And you may see someone you know, who knows. But they're cool because they're practical, right? They're real life teachers with real life kids. And we're working through the messiness of what learning's all about. So gosh, you'd think I'd get paid by MAISA by sharing all of this information, but I don't. It's just really good research that we have leaned into heavily over the years. So when we think about today's session and we think about the focus around phonological awareness, you can really see evidence of phonological awareness teaching within these particular essentials. When I was thinking about maybe our audience today, I thought we might see more pre-K through 3 teachers. Certainly, if you're above grade 3, you can certainly dig back into these other documents, especially if you have some kids that are really striving to become a little bit stronger in their reading and writing. But within these particular essential practices, you can really see phonological awareness being lifted. You'll see in the pre-K interactions around writing. And actually, we're going to watch a little video clip around writing in a pre-K classroom. And the reason I think that this is important is, yes, we're going to be seeing marker in hand, paper on the table, but there's some really interesting ways that we're thinking about where phonological awareness is inserted and embedded in the writing activity. And I think that's the beauty of the essentials. They do not stand alone. You'll say, oh my goodness, essential number 2 is about read alouds. Well, you're doing vocabulary instruction in the midst of your read aloud. So you're actually tapping into 2 different essentials. So please take a mark of this and know that, oh yeah, today's session's really, I can see pulling and working through phonological awareness in these particular essentials. Before we move on to that video, something that I thought might be helpful in a practical sense would to be thinking about our English language and the sounds that are part of it. And remember, we talked about phonological awareness being this umbrella. And within this umbrella are these different ways that we can really dig into sounds in language. So, for example, doing lots of work and lots of oral communication with rhyming words. Oh, that's so fun when we think about poetry, when we think about nursery rhymes, when we just have fun, right? You'll see things like sounds in words in sequence, and really thinking about that syntax that goes along with why do we put one word after the other, and why would our verb go after our noun, and thinking about how language is supposed to sound in English, right? Some folks yesterday joined with the oral language, and they were teachers of multi-language users. And it's exciting to think about that, because oftentimes our multi-language users have difficulty with the syntax of a sentence, because their language may be structured in a different way, where maybe the verb happens in a different place than where the noun is. Sometimes we might see English learners trying to figure out tenses of verbs, and they might leave off an es or an ing, just because of the way they're learning this new structure of our English language. So this is kind of nice to see. We're actually going to show some strategies and think through some of these practices in a little bit. So I'm going to be quiet for a little while. This is about a 9-minute clip. It actually comes right from our literacyessentials.org. This is a lovely pre-kindergarten teacher in Michigan, and she's going to be showing us some interactive writing. What I really want you to be mindful of is thinking about the evidence that you see of phonological awareness. Even though it's interactive writing, really be mindful of hearing sounds in our English language, hearing sounds within speech, and where we see that in this little clip. So enjoy.
When teachers engage in deliberate interactions with children around writing, this supports children's literacy development. In this classroom, children are participating in an interactive writing experience.
So do you remember last week when we were talking about how we need to be caring at school and how we need to remember to treat our friends at school? And you all shared some different ways that we can show that we are caring at school. I was thinking that maybe we could write down one of those ways, and we could make a sign that we could post in the hallway. And then that way people would have a reminder of strategies for showing how they're caring. So how can we make a sign that reminds people to use kind words? What's a sentence we could say that would help people remember to use kind words when they're at school? Think for a second. Kylie, what do you think? Can you think of a sentence?
Be kind and be friends.
Be kind and be friends. The interactive writing lesson I'm going to do with a small group of children, we will write a message together. I've chosen to focus on the topic of caring at our school because it's something we've been talking about in our classroom. And last week, children generated ideas for how we could remind people to be caring at school and what it means to be caring. We're going to make a sign reminding people that we want to be kind and use kind words at school. So I will work with them to actually generate the sentence. We'll generate it together and then sort of decide on what it is. And then once we have the sentence, I will support them in hearing the sounds and the words and writing down as they can. So I will do some of the writing and they will do some of the writing. So let's say that. Let's see. How about say kind words at school? Can you say that sentence? Let's say it together. Say kind words at school. So it has 5 words, that's right. And we could make a sign that says say kind words at school. So that's what we're gonna work on, and we'll take turns like we've done this before. Can you please pick a marker, Kylie? So it's a way for them to engage in writing that's beyond what they could write independently. And at the same time, it's good practice because the way we're doing it, saying the sentence over and over again, stretching out the words, making the sounds, listening for the sounds is how they're going to start writing when they are doing some independent writing using approximated spelling. So as a group, I'm supporting them in participating in an activity that eventually they will do independently, and it's a great opportunity for that kind of guided practice. So let's say our sentence again. Say kind words at school. So say. What do you hear? Oh, C can make that sound, but also S makes that sound. Layla, do you remember how to write an S? You want to start us off? Where would we start? Where do we start when we're writing the first word of a sentence? We're going to start over here. Yep. Can you make an S? So Layla wrote our S. I'm going to write the rest of that word. Say. So I will do some of the writing and they will do some of the writing based on their ability to hear some sounds in words and the letter sound relationships that they know and can write down. And then I'll also do some supporting for the parts of words that either aren't pronounced or that they don't know, or this, at pre-K, they're not paying much attention to medial sounds in words. And so it will mainly focus on initial sounds, maybe some ending sounds as well. Say kind words at school. So say kind is our next word.
K.
Yeah, just like Kylie, right? Hold on, Kylie. Remember, we're going to skip a space. And then can you write that K for us for kind? Oh, yeah, okay. Say kind. I'm going to write some more of that word. I'm going to write the middle of that word. Let's say it again. Kind. Kind.
K.
T. Do you hear a T? Kind. T. That's a D. Like dog. D. That's right. D makes that sound. Can you make a D, Titan? It's okay. Do you remember what it looks like? Yep, you can make a capital. It's okay. Long line, big curve. Okay, let's say our sentence again. Say it with me. Say kind words at school. Words. Words.
Yo.
You know what? Word starts like window. And that's a W.
W.
Yes, yeah. So Titan, can you make a W? I am writing the rest of that word. So here, let's see what we have. Say kind words. Let's say our sentence. Say kind words at school. Interactive writing with pre-K kids is a really great opportunity to practice early print concepts like directionality of print and one-to-one correspondence, matching one spoken word to one word on the page. And it's a special opportunity, too, to practice the sound-letter relationships that the children are learning. They can share the pen with me, and so in that way, they're supported in writing something that is beyond what they could write independently. At. Like apple. What letter is that?
A.
Yeah, Layla, can you make an A for us? Remember, we're going to skip a space after the word, and you put the A right here. So move your marker over. That's great. Remember, words have spaces between them. School. That's just like say, right? Just like sun. What letter is that? An S. Say kind words at school. I'm going to write the middle of that word school. Let's listen to see if we can hear the end. It's got S at the beginning. Let's hear what's at the end. What's at the end, Titan? In a second, Kylie. Like lion. Do you remember? Yes, that's right. So let's read our sentence. Remember, we point to words when we read. Say kind words at school. All right, Titan, you do it. Can you point and read each word of this sentence? Say, right here, kind. Words is down here. At school. And we'll put a period because a sentence has a period at the end. It's especially important that they're authors of a message for an authentic purpose. So we're not just writing something to be writing, but we're actually thinking about what ways can writing help us in our lives and in our lives at school, and making a sign that reminds people to be caring at school is a great authentic purpose for that. And so they have a sense of themselves as authors and creating this important message, and then will eventually hang it up. And so they know that their writing has meaning and is important. So friends, now that we've made our sign, say kind words at school, what can we do with it? Where could we put it so it might help people remember?
Out there, we can make lots of signs and put them everywhere in school.
Learn more.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that clip. It's so fun to watch the kids do exactly what we want them to when we provide some really nice examples of learning about sounds within our speech and tying that into writing. So sometimes as I'm sharing information in this virtual setting, it feels like I'm regurgitating a lot of information. And what I wanted to do just simply is to say the best way that we can lift oral language, the best way we can practice and engage kids in phonological awareness is by really thinking about the joy we bring to our classroom. And this is a lovely picture of showing a teacher who's reading aloud to kids. I will probably want to share with you, if you think you're reading aloud to your kids too much, you're not. You can read to kids so many times throughout the day. Need little snippets of reading. Maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a nursery rhyme, maybe it's a song, or maybe it's your favorite picture book. The more we are modeling proficient reading, efficient reading, a love of reading, those are the gifts that we can give to our kids those days. Sometimes our children might not be getting that gift at home when they leave from school. And so it truly is our duty and responsibility to be reading to kids multiple times throughout the day. And this is a wonderful way to insert that phonological awareness instruction. You'll also see a lovely poem that's titled Joy, and that was pretty specific because it's really about building this joy and bringing it into our classrooms. This is an example of a poetry book. This is something that you can do very easily, where you type out or find a poem, and you can invite children to illustrate what they think of when they hear this poem. After you have gathered a few different poems over the weeks, you staple them together and you've got a poetry book. Kids have been used to hearing the poem aloud. They can interact with the poem. They can reread the poem and practice it with partners. It's just another wonderful way of having access to reading, and especially access for kids to be able to read the words because they've heard that poem again and again, and they know what it means. You see just a picture of nursery rhymes. We've talked about that again and again. Really lifting up the pure joy around language. And that's why I just wanted to take a moment and really think that through. We can't underestimate just bringing to life these joyful interactions in our classroom, especially with our youngest learners. Something I wanted to lean into a little bit, you probably saw a little bit of it through the clip. This is a lovely resource that you might lean into when you're thinking about what kind of instruction you might be providing around phonological awareness. We talked about what falls underneath that umbrella, and we think about maybe some practice around rhyming words, or maybe segmenting words, or thinking about parts within a word like syllables. Maybe thinking about particular phonemes within words and differentiating that. This is a lovely resource that you can lean into to think about, how might I use songs? How might I use poems or games or riddles to help lift up this intentional practice around phonological awareness? So, one other thing that I wanted to share with you in this resource, you'll notice that it goes from easy to hard at the top. There's an arrow there. You noticed actually within the interactive writing session that the teacher supported the students when they were thinking about beginning sounds of words and ending sounds of words. And she literally gave them those medial sounds. Knowing her pre-K kids and where they were, she felt like an entry point was really focusing in on beginning sounds of words and ending sounds of words. When we think about the order of difficulty in phonological awareness, we know kids gravitate towards beginning sounds first, right? And then ending sounds, and eventually they get to those medial sounds. Same holds true with these types of activities. When we think about rhyming, that tends to be a little bit easier for children to grab a hold of before they start really tearing apart into phonemes and thinking about really individual sounds. And you can see like that first example on there is when we changed that song, I like to eat apples and bananas. That's really tough for kids because they're just adjusting one phoneme within those words. Something that I wanted to mention to you is something that one of our project coordinators for our early literacy initiative mentioned to us about this resource, and really being aware that even though it's written as a progression, we would never want it to be linear and hold children back or move them forward just because we thought it was supposed to happen in a linear way. We know that phonological awareness happens in a different way for each kid. And what the goal is, again, to be able to carry these skills on to the work that we're doing as a reader and a writer. So just be mindful of that in the back of your mind when you're doing some work with children around phonological awareness. It may follow in a progression of easier to harder, but we wouldn't want to lockstep it and avoid one activity because we thought they weren't ready for it. Here's an example of something you might choose to do. This one is centered around matching, right? And so you might ask kids, oh, which two words rhyme out of these words here? And you say the words mat, flat, can. And the kids are listening and they're trying to figure it out. You'll know which kids get it right away and which kids might need some more support around matching words that rhyme. I put a little thumbs up and a thumbs down. That's just something really quick and easy. It's a fast gesture that kids can get used to doing. And you can move on, right? And you can move on to another way to help kids learn how to match sounds. Maybe you think about a way to match sounds as a beginning. So when you hear the words hammer and hamburger, you think about those beginning chunks of words, and both of them, oh my goodness, they sound the same. They both have ham. So these are ways to get used to kids understanding sounds in speech and making connections with other words that they know. Maybe you think about the words and how they sound the same at the beginning. You might throw in a little challenge where you've got fish and dish that rhyme, but then you have fan. But we're talking about beginning sounds here. And so it's a nice way to check in. Are kids really paying attention? Are they able to segment? those sounds and find ones that match. Maybe even this next one, you can see how it has shifted in difficulty because this one's around the vowel sounds in the middle of a word. So feet and beach. Can you hear those medial sounds and do they match, right? So thinking about different activities like these tasks are hugely important. Sometimes you see it happening easier in small group instruction, but certainly it can be happening with your whole group as well. For time's sake, I think I'm just going to show the very beginning of this clip. I think it's about a 8-minute long clip. And I think I'm just going to show about 4 minutes of it, if that's okay with you. You can certainly access these clips on literacyessentials.org if you'd like to see the video in its entirety. One thing to pay attention to while you're watching this clip is in what ways are you noticing that the teacher is supporting kids to be successful during their small group instruction? So she's using a lot of different tools and maneuvers and language to help support them. Just be mindful of those and think about what you might be able to incorporate into your daily practice.
Activities that involve segmenting sounds in words, such as Elkonin boxes, help children to build phonemic awareness. In this classroom, students are moving tokens into boxes to help them segment the sounds within words.
The lesson you're going to see me do with a small group of kids today is going to be stretching and segmenting sounds. So first you're going to see them use a physical model and try and figure out how many sounds that they're hearing as they work. And then later on it'll progress to where you will see them trying to connect those sounds to letters. Stretching words out is where we take the sounds and we slow them down. And we do that for the students to model it to them first. And then we start to segment the sound. So for example, if I did the word fin, I would say eh, and they would listen to those sounds and determine how many sounds there were. So they would say and know that there are 3 sounds in that word. We're going to try and listen for sounds in some words today. The amount of sounds you hear are going to be used. We're going to use this box to help us with the amount of sounds we hear. Okay, so first I'm going to show you. If I had the word fin, I'm going to put this star on the left so I know I need to start here because I go from left to what?
Right.
Right. So I'm going to start here. That way I know this is my first box when I'm looking at it from me. If I put it this way for you, it would start here. And I'm going to try and figure out how many sounds are in this word here. What is this arrow pointing to?
The fin.
The fin. Oh, I heard fish. But what is the arrow pointing to on the fish? Fin. Okay, so first I'm going to say fin. I'm going to stretch those sounds out so I can see how many I hear. Fin. You try that. Now we're going to take those sounds and we're going to segment them or make them smaller, like this. Let's listen to that beginning sound. Then it goes So I'm going to put some of these counters down, and I'm going to put one down for each sound that I hear. Ready? How many sounds do I have in that word?
3.
3 sounds in that word. I'm going to ask you to try the same thing. Remember, the star goes on the left.
Okay, so you get an example of what that looks like with these Elkonin boxes. It's a way to help kids segment a word into each phoneme, right? Each smallest part of speech. And I love how this teacher gave multiple chips at the bottom, and it wasn't just 3, right? With fin, she gave multiple ones. So the children would have to practice and think about how many different sounds they were hearing within each different word. You can also do word parts using the Elkonin boxes. But in this case, she took one particular sound and divided that out. So Elkonin boxes are great for helping to segment sounds and speech. And then eventually you can connect those to letters. And you would have seen that if you watched a little further, how she shifted from little chips to using actual magnetic letters that you can manipulate. And it helps to involve children in that movement because they're able to then decipher the different sounds and distinguish those using manipulatives as well. It helps them teaching letter sound relationships, but also thinking about building onto words and thinking about how other words will help you learn other words, right? So if you know Finn, what if I decided to change out the F and I put a B there? How would that change the way the word would be? So you would be really mindful of thinking about creating those analogies and connections. So if I know this word, it will help me to learn this word. One way that you might consider thinking about your formative assessments in the classroom is by using like a recording sheet similar to the one that's shown on the screen. It really helps to promote that individualized instruction that we're striving for. We talked a little bit earlier about really providing opportunities for instruction that are essential for particular kids and where they're at in their development of phonological awareness. So there might be some students that might not need as much instruction in this area because they're already successful. So what we would want them to do is spend more time reading and writing real authentic text than going about maybe filling out a worksheet or doing some magnetic letter work on their whiteboard. This is just one way to record and help you keep track of who might be successful in one area or what area might a child need a small group instruction focused on. So this actually comes from a lovely book that we've been engaged in study in this past year. It's called Shifting the Balance, and I really wanted to bring it forward to you because we're really only honing in on one chapter of the book around phonological awareness. This one really leans into all those multiple pieces that help to strengthen a proficient reader. Just as we went back into our research earlier, it takes multiple pieces to help us become quite efficient and proficient in our reading. Their website is actually called The Six Shifts based on this book. So I encourage you to dig in and do some reading and some thinking and some learning. I think we'll probably be offering some book studies around this too in the coming months. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. Michelle's smiling because I know she's involved in that work. Do you want to say anything, Michelle?
Sure, I just put in the chat too. We are going to do a countywide book study. So if you're interested in being part of that, just send me a quick email. I just put my email in the chat and we'll make sure you get a copy of that book.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Michelle. All right, so we have come to the end of our day. Just a couple of things to leave you with before you log off and maybe enjoy some sunshine. We talked about the phonological awareness, and really it's part of a system that refers to sounds, right? Oftentimes you can say, oh, that can be done in the dark. When we think about the videos we saw, that practical piece, oftentimes it is connected to text or letters. That's okay. But when we specifically talk about phonological awareness, it really truly is matching the sounds that we hear in speech. We can support our phonological awareness in our early readers. It's very important to the improvement and achievement in literacy instruction. And this is kind of a nice thing to hold on to. So children don't automatically identify sounds just because they can speak and understand language. But on the other hand, we've got some kids that need that don't need phonemic awareness training at all, because they're able to hear and identify sounds easily. And they will probably benefit more from authentic reading and writing tasks. So you could have a mixture within your classroom. In fact, I'm probably going to guarantee you have a mixture of kids. So we don't want to assume that students have all of those sounds, and they're aware of them, and they're able to do everything we do with sounds to manipulate them and help us become readers. But think about those kids that are doing it really well without you. Let's move them on, right? Another thing we talked about was phonemic awareness. The difference, it's just a subcategory within phonological awareness, but it's really about kind of manipulating those sounds, being able to segment and blend and isolate the different phonemes. And lastly, we would challenge you to dig into those those essential practices in early literacy in elementary school, into all of your daily routines, right? Not just in the literacy block, but throughout your entire day, really working on enhancing your students' phonological awareness. And ultimately, it's going to increase their literacy knowledge and their skills to become more proficient readers. So I want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions around phonological awareness, if you have any questions around oral language, please reach out to me or Michelle. We're happy to chat with you and share some more resources. And then just to come next week, I will be hopefully facilitating another session, and we will ground our practice around the phonics part of foundational skills. So sometimes it's nice to have each piece so you have a better sense of what we mean when we talk about foundational skills. But until then, please enjoy your evening, and thanks so much for joining us today.